Hello and welcome back to the Editorial, TLDR's occasional podcast where we talk about everything we've got wrong since the last time we spoke. As always, I'm joined by TLDR's Editor-in-Chief, Zach Michaelis.
Yeah, hello.
How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, actually.
Good.
We haven't stuck, as you implied, we haven't stuck to our stated schedule of once every 2 weeks.
We're going to, though.
We are. Yeah, we are, actually. We've scheduled it in.
We're relaunching the podcast next week, and alongside that, and alongside the new regimented podcast structure, Editorial.
Yeah.
It's coming down.
So it's like a meta editorial. We're already apologising, not for other videos, but for the editorial.
I like that. I like that. So as regular viewers will know, essentially this podcast is us running through videos which proved at least somewhat controversial over the last few weeks. Discussing why they were controversial, potentially apologising if we've made a mistake, or justifying decisions we've made if we stand by the original video. So where do you want to start? Is there a channel that makes sense to start with, a video, a topic?
I think actually there've been probably fewer like errors / controversies than normal. So I think if we just do individual videos, that probably works.
Sure.
So the last time we did the editorial was almost exactly a month ago. It was the 6th of November. And since then, by my count, I think there have been probably 5 videos, maybe 4 or 5 videos that are worth mentioning.
Okay.
Where there have been sort of like errors or controversies that I think merit an apology. I think the first one, this one annoyingly came out the day after the most recent editorial, and Rory,
always happens like that.
Is the way. Rory is doing the sort of technology behind the podcast, but it was one of his videos. It was the Schengen video.
Can't believe you're putting him on blast while he's in the room and doesn't have a microphone.
None of the mistakes were Rory's fault, actually. They were all animation mistakes, and then there was some controversy over Ben's pronunciation of Czechia. Or Czechia. I don't know which one people like these days.
Which one did he say?
I think
or did
he
you
said,
say a third option?
I think he said Czechia, and I think people like Czechia.
Czechia. Okay.
But I think the more glaring errors were to do with the flags, and it was, for example, we had all the maps rather on the animation. Croatia was excluded from Schengen when it is a part of Schengen. We showed the Icelandic flag instead of the Norwegian flag. Just reading these is embarrassing. The Slovakian flag instead of the Slovenian flag.
Oh, no.
And then we misdated the Treaty of Rome. We said it happened in 2021, but it happened in 1957. So
none of those numbers even slightly match.
I know. And obviously, this all requires an apology, and we are really sorry about that. That's just too sloppy. And I hope it's an animation errors for reasons we talked about on the podcast before are sort of difficult to fully prevent against, but we're hopefully we've done what we can to address that. And by my count, there have been fewer animation errors, so I think that has sort of worked. I think we have got slightly better at that. But anyway, let's move on to the next video. The next one is my bad, actually, and no one really commented on this, but I realized the error after the fact, which is in the Republicans invade. Why do so many Republicans want to invade Mexico video?
Oh no, this was controversial when we first released it in the summer.
Yeah, well, we should actually do a bit of a backstory on this one. So we first released this video, I don't know when, like 6 months ago? Maybe a bit longer?
It was June or July.
So longer?
I was
5 6 months ago, whatever. And it got slammed. People were like, well, no, the Americans are never going to invade Mexico. What a ridiculous idea. I think you even got a sassy comment by JJ.
Yeah, in person.
And JJ McCullough was mocking us for
I don't know if he was mocking us.
Okay, sorry, that's an unfair representation. I don't know JJ McCullough, so I shouldn't be like recounting this story.
Yeah.
But yeah, and at the time I was like, this is just obviously unfeasible. It's only Trump saying that. What's slightly frustrating is that I succumbed to popular pressure at that time. I said we should pull this video. The like-dislike ratio is way too low. And
JJ McCullough doesn't like it.
JJ McCullough
He's hassling Jack on the streets of LA. 21st of June, by the way.
Okay. But in retrospect, well, not in retrospect, but after that video, basically every Republican candidate has now come out in favor of that idea.
Yeah.
So DeSantis, Haley, and Ramaswamy, and Trump has been talking up even more. And it's just become a more popular talking point in Republican circles. And maybe invade is too strong. I mean, basically the idea is to sort of use US military force to undermine the cartels with or without official Mexican government certification.
Yeah.
The mistake I made on that is I claimed that AMLO had made a series of constitutional changes via a supermajority. This is not true. I don't understand how I made this mistake. I don't know where I got that information from, but it's just not true. There were some controversial constitutional changes being proposed. I think they were mostly stopped after some pretty significant protests. And it's worth saying that AMLO doesn't have a functioning supermajority, so I don't know where I got that from. So I am sorry for that. That is entirely my bad, and I'm not sure how bad I made such a glaring error.
Less controversial than the first time round, though.
Oh yeah, well I just think by virtue of the fact that it now really is a mainstream Republican talking point, and the polls suggest that Republicans, chances are, I think the base case at the moment is that Trump ends up in the White House in 2024, save for, obviously there's like caveats about third candidates and maybe someone will drop out, maybe Trump be in jail, how that plays into polling, who knows.
Yeah.
But the base case does seem to be Trump in 2024. And given what the rest of his policy program looks like, attacking/invading Mexico is not that far-fetched, especially if there's widespread support in the Republican Party. So it's just more possible than it once was.
And the reaction to the video then, kind of like dislike-wise, the first one was like low 90s, right? Low to mid 90s?
91, 92, something like that.
What was this one? Was this one still contentious?
Above
the fact
95.
Okay.
But slightly lower than usual. People saying like, oh, no one's really talking about this. But I think you can see the conversation we've just had was playing out in the comments. People would say, like, oh, this is a silly video, not going to happen. And who would say, like, well, watch the video. All the Republican candidates are saying that they will do that. Polling suggests Republicans will probably win in 2024. So why is it not going to happen? Maybe you think this is just sort of like pre-game rhetoric. But like, I don't think Trump really does pre-game rhetoric. Trump does pre-game rhetoric and then he does the action as well. Yeah. So, that's probably not true. And then there's definitely some stuff where Trump's rhetoric was more bellicose than his policy.
You're right. Yeah.
But it's clearly true that it's not as if Trump is just solely bluffing in these sorts of situations. Like, he does actually want to follow through on them.
Whether he'll be able to, whether he does is different. But.
So a lot of on this, and they don't want to go into this too much now, but a lot of the sort of like post-fact biographies of the Trump era suggests that Trump really did try to follow through on some of his wildest policies. And it was only basically the fact that he had like a relatively, again, relative is instructive here, but a relatively moderate set of officials around him that prevented him from really going haywire.
Sure.
And doing stuff
bloody blob coming for these politicians yet again. The swamp, the blob here, the swamp there.
But this time around, he has been preparing a team of people who basically just agree with his policy platform.
So this time round. No re-election. Well, unless he does something properly wild. No, but it's not like he has to compete for re-election. Second term, often people do crazier stuff. So.
Yeah. So this time I just think he has a team that will facilitate his instincts. Anyway, moving on. The other one, I made another mistake. Again, it wasn't really caught out, but I do think I should apologise. And it was in the Argentina economy video. I said there's going to be an over 50% cut in overall government spending. That was a misreading by me. I thought he said he was going to cut government spending as a percentage of GDP to 15% of GDP from 32% to 50. Oh, maybe it's slightly higher than 32, but from basically something above 30% of GDP to 15% of GDP. He actually was going to cut it by 15% of GDP, which implies something more like a 40% cut in spending. So I said over 50%, it should have actually been a 40% cut in spending. And there was also a video using the animation that's of him dancing that in the context of the animation, it seemed to imply that was straight after the election result, but actually that video is from earlier. There was also a slightly entertaining typo from one of our animators, which is when he was comparing the Argentinian peso to the dollar. Instead of USD, we had USB, which was fun. Yeah, on another funny note, I can't remember what video this was from, but Ben also accidentally said the Soviet Democrats instead of the Social Democrats on a video on the same day. Anyway, I'd like to apologise for that. So that was my error.
Yeah.
And then the penultimate video worth mentioning is the German debt break video. Some people push back against the characterization of government shutdown for what happens basically if no new budget is agreed. I think that's fair. I think that's hyperbole. And slightly beyond the pale. The government, there wasn't a real risk of like a shutdown in any meaningful sense. Government spending does have to be changed and like increase in government spending are shelved, but it's not the risk of a shutdown in like the sort of acute sense and sort of like the American style sense. So I think that's fair. And then also in the Germany video, when this is so unfair on Alex because it's just so complicated and he's our animator for this, but showed the logo of the wrong constitutional court. And it's partly because the Germans have just frankly ridiculous names for their court. So finding out which court is which is just, this one's called he put the Bundesverwaltungsgericht instead of the other one.
You think saying that is going to get us in less trouble?
Let's take that out.
No, keep it in.
Let's take
Keep
that
it in. Say it again, sorry.
I'm definitely not saying it again. That's why I said the other one, because I'm not reading the other one either.
Oh, you half committed and then quickly realised too many syllables.
But nonetheless, that is an error. So I'm sorry about
Yeah.
that. I half blame the Germans, but whatever.
Sure.
No, jokes aside. Sorry
Yeah.
about that. That's how bad. And then the final one, I think this is probably the one that's going to spend the most time on, was a video done I think a couple of days ago now on Cyprus. So I think that there are broadly like two, let's say, I'm going to say three criticisms of the Cyprus video. There is a sense in which it was, so the first criticism is there was a sense in which it might have been unfairly pro-Greek Cypriot. I'm not sure that's necessarily fair. I think perhaps in our selection of which context was relevant, that might be true. But I would say that in an 8-minute video, you're never going to have time to do every single bit of context. And so a lot of people are saying, like, oh, you failed to mention this, you failed to mention that. And maybe that the specifics of what we failed to mention betray some bias. But and I think potentially it's true that it was slightly biased against the Turkish Cypriot community. I think we probably should have mentioned, for example, that the Annan plan failed because the Greek Cypriot population rejected it. And we didn't mention that. But yeah, I think that's sort of half merited, but at the same time, we're never going to get all the context in an 8-minute video. But we did make some actual clear errors. And one of them is, actually, before I get into clear error, the second thing is that when talking about whether or not a political settlement is possible, and this is entirely my bad, I just can talk basically about what the EU and Erdogan want, and that just ignores the agency and the relevance, the political relevance of what Cypriots want, what Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots want. And I think that's fair, and I think it's a sort of realpolitik way of looking at those sort of negotiations. But not only do I think it's sort of a bit peak on those populations, I also think it actually is just wrong in that what they think and whether or not they would agree to something just is relevant.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And then the final thing is, and this is just a clear error, is that we imply that the populations were divided basically from the start, when actually it was sort of only post-invasion that the populations became divided. There was a population transfer.
Yeah.
And that, correspondingly, Enosis was about integrating all of Cyprus into Greece, not just the Greek Cypriot part, because there wasn't really a Greek Cypriot part.
Yeah.
It was also the population was spread out a lot more. So yeah, there are errors there, and I'd like to apologise for those. So those are the individual videos.
Yeah.
I think the final thing worth talking about is this is just something from the last editorial. Last editorial, we basically talked about the fact that the majority of our errors at this point do come from narration. The animation errors are mostly cleared up. The writing errors are actually relatively rare. Most of the small errors. And that's obviously not your or Ben's fault.
Sure.
Because you're reading stuff that you're not familiar with. And I said, maybe the potential solution is that I'll do some more of these narration wise. That obviously just hasn't happened. And I'm sort of saying this publicly so I can try and motivate myself to actually do it.
Interesting. Bit of public accountability.
Yeah, exactly. But I think to probably mitigate against errors, I'll probably try and do it more in the future. So yeah, and I think that is basically everything. So if you happy with that?
I'm happy with that.
Yeah. So apologies for the errors. If there are any that I've missed out, please do mention in the comments. And we will get around to addressing them, I guess, in 2 weeks' time or something.
Yeah.
Is it going to be 2 weeks' time?
2 weeks' time. It's pretty good that we're kind of managed to maintain our kind of relatively low level of mistakes lately. That, especially when you consider the pressures externally, both from writing the newspaper and the fact that we've got 2 new writers on board in the last 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And they've done remarkably well. That this editorial isn't just here are mistakes they've made, and not in a mean way. They're perfectly competent, great people.
Yeah.
But writing a TLDR video is different. The pressures are different. The style is different, and the fact that this isn't just full of lots of errors from that, I think is kind of fun.
Yeah.
And is a reflection of how well both of them have done, and also on the systems we have in place that we've been talking about forever, with kind of you checking through stuff, the balances, people looking through things. So I think. I not pat ourselves on the back too much, but I think having kind of 4 or 5 videos referenced here for a month's worth of content, especially when you consider the fact there's a bunch of new people.
Yeah.
New
And the
people's
newspaper
scripts.
stuff.
And the
Yeah.
newspaper.
Yeah. No, I you know.
We should do an episode of the editorial for the newspaper, actually. We know of 2 errors in the newspaper.
Gosh, should we talk about that quickly now?
We can do. First error. Well, I know I can think of 2. You might not think of more.
You go.
First error is my letter from the editor. The first sentence is just missing for some reason. So the sentence begins, or the paragraph begins with like, although, which just doesn't make any sense.
No.
There was a previous sentence which at some point got cut and no one spotted.
It's quite on brand though. It's quite fun. You know, you open it, page 1.
Page 1, word 1,
error.
although. And the other one was a typo on the spelling of Ronaldo on the back page,
And
which
we should say that this is embarrassing now because it's such a silly error. But
Yeah.
we did catch that error. It's just that there was confusion over which like Google Doc to copy and paste into the.
So yeah, we were using InDesign obviously to create the document.
Yeah.
But all of the text was being created in Google Docs, and the Google Doc was fixed. But I think there were 2 Google Docs.
Yeah,
I think it
there
was
were.
only fixed in one. And when doing the final InDesign pull, we pulled from the wrong one.
Yeah.
Which was just that's just annoying. It's not
Yeah.
the end of the world. Do you know of any other issues in there?
No, I haven't. No, I should probably have a quick read through, but I haven't had time yet. But I'll have a quick read through at some point.
I think we're pretty confident. The whole thing was read through 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
The Google Docs. And I think the only way that issues could have snuck in is copy paste stuff, which are what both of those are.
Yeah.
And I've read through most of it. I haven't spotted anything. So I'm pretty confident there isn't anything else major.
No, I'm.
But if you have a
confident
copy of
as
the newspaper, let us know. And if you don't, you can use the link in the description and code TLDR podcast to get 30% off this week only. It's a bit late to be doing the promo, but like, there you go. 30% off, that's huge.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say is that I do feel like we keep coming back to the podcast and we keep saying we've done, you know, basically we apologise, but then we also excuse our errors and we say like, we've had a chaotic week or month or whatever. And I think that is all true. And I really do think though, and then maybe we're getting optimistic again.
Yeah.
But I really do think we are now finally out of the tunnel in that respect.
Yeah.
Like we've always said, I mean, the newspaper was a bit new, but we've always said like, it's the hiring of 2 new writers that is going to take time. Once we've sorted that out, then we should have a bit more of a rhythm. And until that point, it's been a bit ad hoc and a bit.
And we're still
squeezed.
only like, Georgina has been here for, this is her 2nd week.
Yeah, a week and a half.
Nadia, this is her 3rd week. So like, we're still not fully there with the new writers. But as I say, the fact that like, this isn't a bunch of errors from them, just by virtue of them being new, suggests that we are very much on that track. And you're right. We always said we needed more capacity from writers and journalists and stuff. And we do, and we have that now. So you're right. Maybe 1 more month we can keep using that excuse. And then when that's done,
and
we've
then
got
my
nothing.
baby comes.
Then your baby comes and you're off. And then I'm grilling Ben or something. Or Rory. I'm looking at you, Rory. Acting editor-in-chief.
Watch yourself, yeah?
I don't think I want that.
Yeah, and hopefully that should also, I think one of the other issues is that because of the reduced writer capacity, that's meant that we've been really rushing through videos, and that has also put time pressure on the animators. And hopefully having more writers will give even the animators a bit more time.
Yeah,
that
it's
should
true.
feed through into animation. Like the rate of animation errors should be lower, essentially. Also worth saying that one of our animators has been simultaneously building a studio for us.
That's
That's
true.
Tom.
The
So
oth-
Tom gets an enormous amount of stay,
And Jan has been making a newspaper.
and yeah, so that again, hopefully that the studio is built and the newspaper is done should mean that they're a little bit less rushed.
Evidence of the studio and the newspaper.
I know,
right behind
enormous now, oh my God, enormous thank you to both Jan and Tom. But so I think that is basically everything.
it. Yeah.
Happy?
Happy.
I'm happy as well.
See you in 2 weeks.
My fault for being a bitch and not doing narrations.